Landing a big wide receiver. We speculated, everybody else did, and now the delivery. Just hours ago, KEON Coleman to Florida State. There it is. Welcome in, everyone, to Florida State Seminoles Live right here at the Voice of College Football. We talk Noles with all of you each and every Wednesday. Where you been? So jump on in, leave those comments and questions, bring some folks with you, and then you can transition right from here to catch Logan and Nole Game Day at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So it's a good doubleheader of Florida State football talk. Logan Robinson, Nole Game Day, of course. Chris Frazier from Spear Addicts setting us up each and every week. Great to have both of you. How you guys doing?
Doing great. Feels like it's a good evening for sure. Some FSU fans might be feeling pretty good tonight. Might go out for dinner, take the wife out, take the girlfriend out, celebrate a little bit. But yeah, a good day for Florida State, and something I know we're going to jump into in just a minute. But doing good, Mark.
Sounds like Logan's telling us his plans for tonight.
We might have to go grab a bottle of wine. That might be why I'm getting out of here at 6:30. Jump over to the grocery store real quick, and then grab a bottle before our show at 8 or 7.
Well, Logan, you set us up last week by saying KEON Coleman is not a need. We got a nice wide receiver room, but it's a want, and it's a good want to have, and it would be a great get. And you know what? These championship caliber teams, whether you're going to Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, they have a lot of wants on their team. There aren't a whole lot of needs left on those teams. They got rooms full of wants. So, hey, why not have more playmakers?
No joke at all. This is one that we've kept a very close eye on. Coming from Michigan State, playmaker, 8 touchdowns, almost close to 800 yards in receiving. This was something where you're just adding more firepower and reliability and, touchdowns practically straight up with you to your offense. And so between Ole Miss and Florida State, I was hearing things throughout the week, but then really this morning when I shot over a text to a source over close to Ole Miss, and just from what I was getting from them and them not feeling too confident anymore as they were back whenever he was at his visit, it just made sense to where this was going to be leaning in Florida State's direction. And just about an hour later, they're like, yep, and it's going to be all FSU. So this was a nice snag for Florida State and Mike Norvell, what they're going to be able to do in the offense with the wide receiver room that they already have. It was cool to see Trey Benson jump onto the IG Live too as well during the commitment video, and seeing the support. I've seen also a handful of other Florida State Seminoles inside of the IG Live in the comments, and you had Jordan Travis too commenting on Twitter. I don't think outside of that visit that KEON Coleman made, I think Ole Miss would had to have done something extremely impressive to maybe turn KEON's opinion away from wanting just to select and stick with Florida State. I think after leaving Tallahassee, he almost had his mind made up, and he was just going to go kind of give his time and hold his word to going to visit Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. But it's definitely an interesting situation where Florida State now has another starter at wide receiver, whereas we went through the spring and we saw Kentron Poitier jump up and is expected to be a starter in 2023 as well. But the size, the length, the reliability with the hands is something that Florida State needs on this roster going into 2023, and having depth there, even if that, because what you've got behind that, you've also got some young stars. We haven't even talked about Destin Hill yet, but you've got a lot of young talent behind really elite, experienced talent now, and that's something that Florida State hasn't had in that wide receiver room in 10 years. I mean, they haven't. And so this is something I thought it was really interesting to listen to KEON and also say he's going to be there like 7 to 8 months. He's expecting this to be a money season for him. So we'll see if that can happen, and Mike Norvell can put him into spots to make those plays and make those highlight grabs in the red zone and in the end zone, like we've seen him do for Michigan State against good competition like Michigan, their in-state rivals. So overall, a major win for Florida State, and just continues to prove how lethal Mike Norvell is inside the transfer portal right now. He is the best college football head coach right now in the portal.
Chris, your take.
I think it's a good thing to want and a bad thing to need. So I'm excited for Florida State. I'm excited for the recruiting process. I'm excited for what the staff did, and also want to give a shout out to the Battles Inn, because I know that was a definite factor in his decision whether he goes to Florida State or Ole Miss. I don't know exactly what these NIL groups can say to these players from the transfer, before they're actually here. I don't know how all of that goes exactly, but whatever was said was obviously enough. I agree with Logan. I think that Ole Miss would have had to done something just spectacular to get Coleman to decide to go somewhere other than Florida State. I thought he had his mind made up when he stayed that extra day and canceled going to Auburn. I was like, okay, if this kid's canceling a visit to somewhere else, then he's probably going to go ahead and commit right now while on campus. But like Logan said, he covered pretty much every bit of it. But, he stayed a man of his word, went and visited Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin out of respect. And I think that Ole Miss did their due diligence, and I don't think that they failed NIL-wise. I think what the ultimate decision came down to is what team's more geared to do what. And right now, I don't think there's a Heisman contender on the Ole Miss team, and I could be wrong, but I haven't heard of one. I don't think Ole Miss is projected to potentially win the SEC this year. Florida State is being projected to win the ACC. But, I think Ole Miss did a good job on trying to recruit him away from Florida State, because they can say that they've put in a couple of guys this past season into the NFL draft. I think that's probably what they key focused on, what they could do. But I think we're getting a young man that's not only really athletic, but his football IQ is really, really high. If you was able to hear him speak at all about what he was looking for in an offense and from an offensive coordinator and the type of system that's ran. And, I think it came down to the easiest answer is Jordan Travis is the better quarterback of the two. And you want to be with your best possible quarterback to do what he was wanting to do. And I think you could have went to Ole Miss and been the guy, but you would have then got those double coverages. You would have been, they would have put a target on your back. They're coming after you. And at Florida State, you have Johnny Wilson. You have a couple of guys that might demand a double coverage, or no one's going to get double covered because no one can afford to let one of these other guys run down the field on you. I think this is huge for Florida State because, Pokey was that guy in the what was it when we were playing Miami? He was that guy that caught that long touchdown pass, and then also another game. But what he pulled up and did at LSU was big. And that was what I was wondering, what type of wide receiver was going to take Pokey's position. Like, what are we going to get that could potentially do that? And then hearing Micah was injured, and we didn't know when he was coming back. And then, that ultimately turned into him transferring to Utah. So for Florida State to land the high-caliber wide receiver in Coleman, regardless of want or need, and I agree, though, it was definitely a want. This is something that Florida State's going to be able to hang their hat on for quite some time, because I think it really affects recruiting. I think it affects the gentleman like JoJo Trader. This guy just committed to a team, and he said it in his commitment video, where I'm going to be taking my talents for the next 8 to 9 months is Tallahassee to Florida State University. So he's planning on a one and done going to the NFL. So if a guy can trust this staff with a very short period of time to try to make it into the NFL, that speaks loud volume out to all the recruits that could get 3 to 4 years out of being at Florida State. So I think it's actually a much bigger deal than even just his production on the field. I think what it does for recruiting in every position, but especially wide receiver, is absolutely huge.
Yeah, we take a look at KEON Coleman's game log this past season. I saw the game at Washington, lit up the Huskies, a top 10 team with a really good secondary, 9 catches for $116, 2 touchdowns. Not so much at Ohio State, but obviously it's a wide receiver. He can only do so much. They got blown out of that game. Logan mentioned the game against Michigan. Big day, 5 catches for $155 and a touchdown. Penn State, one of the top defenses in the country, had a nice day against them. 8 catches for 91 after a 100-yard game against Indiana. So that's what KEON Coleman delivered last year. I'm looking at an ESPN ranking that came out this week that had Johnny Wilson listed as the 6th best wide receiver in college football. And I'm right on board with you too in regards to, if you look at Ole Miss, actually, they may have the deepest quarterback room in the country. They got 3 of them. Spencer Sanders is a good one out of Oklahoma State. He's kind of erratic. He's not a great quarterback. He's a good one. And Jackson Arnold was their starter last. Jackson Dart. Jackson Arnold's at elsewhere, but Jackson Dart, decent player, threw about 20 touchdowns, 3,000 yards last year. And then they got Walker Howard, who's a former 5-star out of LSU. So they got quarterbacks in that room, but nobody's as good as Jordan Travis. So there's only going to be one guy playing, and Jordan Travis is definitely the best quarterback in that mix. And that might have been enough, along with some NIL offerings, to do it for Florida State. And again, Logan made the comment concerning Ole Miss's plight in the SEC. It's a good program. It's a nice program. Lane Kiffin's going to scheme up some things and definitely put up big numbers for anybody with talent there. But they're buried in the SEC. They got a good team, not a great team. They're not going to contend most likely for a championship there, while Florida State looks to be neck and neck with Clemson, fighting it out for the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's you add it to what already Florida State's been able to do in that transfer portal, specifically at the skill player position group with Jaheim Bell. I mean, it's been a long, strong offseason for what Florida State's been able to do in the transfer portal, grabbing him from South Carolina. And whenever you're able to throw out a guy that was a reliable target for their quarterbacks at Michigan State, you know, it came down to the quarterback decision, I think, for KEON, and a guy that has shown growth and continues to improve throwing down the field, keeping his eyes downfield. And that quarterback is Jordan Travis, and he's projected to be one of the top quarterbacks, top 3 in the country going into this upcoming season. So those rankings aren't the same at Ole Miss. So it should have been kind of easy for KEON to kind of figure this out, and we'll see what Mike Norvell is going to be able to do with Coleman. I mean, we go back and you look at Malik McLean, he's no longer there. Micah Pittman's not there. We still don't have I'm not fully secured. I don't have full security that we're going to see Winston Wright as a full go in 2023. And that's a big question mark going to the fall camp still. So you got to bring in a guy that can bring reliability and experience and can bring some production to a room that is expected to make another jump after last season and go on a run for an ACC championship. You know, this is all a game plan for this season, and it's to put elite players around Jordan Travis. And so if Florida State's able to build chemistry throughout this offseason, once we get into camp, this offensive line, I think, is going to be one that we're going to keep a close eye on. If they can build that chemistry and keep Jordan Travis safe and healthy, the guys around are going to just eat up what Jordan Travis is going to be able to give them, and what Mike Norvell is going to be able to build between his game plans and schemes and what he's going to do against some of these ACC teams and LSU week 1. It's just exciting and kind of just fun to sit back and think what he can do with that offense with Coach Atkins.
DJ, good to see you there. DJ and I work together there at the Worldwide Leader. DJ's a good guy. Good to see you, DJ. Thanks for being here, man. Logan, it goes to a spot where you hit on, we all hit on, but you in particular last week, and hate to go from a big high to, not anything devastating. Jaylen Key's a nice player. As you mentioned, he wasn't going to be any kind of game changer, that type of player at safety, but a good piece to put in the rotation. He chooses Alabama. You talked about the need at that position. As we near June, what kind of options does this coaching staff have to piece something together to try to shore up that position?
Last week, with Jaylen Key picking Alabama, it's weird. He had ties here, had ties being closer to home in Alabama, but also played high school ball around Tallahassee area. Also had ties with Corey Fuller. Florida State's recruiting assistant now, former FSU legend, you could say, but ended up picking Alabama, and Florida State's now in an interesting spot at the safety position still. We were able to land Baker earlier this week, but specifically actually yesterday. I think, really it's about building some more experience back there, guys that have proven playing time, hopefully a decent or good level and college. And, I know you have to allow or rely a lot on the grad transfer portion of this, but Florida State, I don't see any kind of position group or like position changes for some of these guys. We kind of talked about Azrae Thomas and some conversation there, and maybe Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones would be the only one that I would think I would not be against giving him a few tests back there at the safety position, but you're still relying on Akeem Dent to have a fully healthy year, something that has been hindering him throughout the latter half of his career. And then Shyheim Brown, which we're all stupidly high on, as we should be, tons of talent there, but still a little bit raw and is working to gain some more experience. He's going to get a ton of it this year. He's going to get a ton of playing time, but what happens when one of those guys go down and you're now allowing on some guys that haven't played in Adam Fuller's system at the safety position? You were held a lot along lines of the trust of Jamie Robinson making plays for you and saving touchdowns and being in the right spots at the right times. So it's still a work in process that I think that Florida State's going to have to find an answer for. But yeah, losing Jaylen Key, to Alabama, I wasn't the highest on him, but it would have been a huge depth piece that Florida State needed. I think it's kind of like a Jarquez McClellan, where he was able to go in when some guys needed some time off from some plays or some drives. He could go in and he knew where he needed to be, and he did pretty well for whenever he needed to sub in. So that's something that Florida State needs whenever you're going to make on a run like this, when you're going to play, when you're expecting to play so many games this season. Florida State's got to have a good depth chart to be able to withstand that.
I think what can really help the safety position, other than obviously play time for some of the young guys and exactly what Logan's covering, is defensive line play. If we get to the quarterback quick enough, if we put enough pressure on the quarterback to make bad throws, bad decisions, or make the short throws, then your corners have their opportunity and linebackers have their opportunity. And I think our defensive line, especially depth-wise, having Fisk, bringing him in as the number one defensive tackle transfer, I think Ioto Afasi is going to end up being bigger than most people think. I think he's going to end up doing something, keeping Farmer here. And then you've got Fabian Lovett coming back. I think that you're going to have to get some of that slack that the safety position may have. You're going to have to try to take care of that elsewhere on the field by putting pressure on offenses faster, or putting a lot of pressure on them to make mistakes, so that these young guys can get that opportunity of repetition. But I'm with Logan 100%. Hopefully there is a grad transfer that's worth getting. Hopefully one hits the portal and we're capable of going after him. I'm not going to bet on that, but it would be very nice. Florida State could use a little bit of luck with that one. But yeah, I think Shyheim Brown being in is probably going to be really good, but Logan hit the nail on the head. He's still really raw. But we've got what we've got. And according to our slogan, we're all that we need. So hopefully that stands true, and our safeties get it together. The ones that we do have, young or old, or raw or not raw, hopefully we pull it together, and then other positions help take up for the loss of the safeties that have left. But kind of going back to the Coleman situation, I just want to know what the average size in college football is. I'm going to look this up for DBs and corners and stuff, period, because we're going to potentially have our shortest wide receiver on the field being 6'3" at times. You've got, if Burrell is able to come back, and you go with Coleman, who is 6'4", you got Johnny Wilson at 6'7". I know that Jaheim Bell is a tight end, but he's also 6'4". Just everywhere you look, there's a lot of length. And then if you put Kyle Morlock in, which is another tight end, he's 6'7". I'm trying to figure out, if you put these guys on the goal line, how many corners do you really have on a team that can cover all of that size at one time? and none of them are clumsy. They're all pretty athletic. So I'm just really excited for our offense, and maybe our offense being as good as it is helps the defense as well, because I think it puts pressure on the other defense or the other offense to have to keep up scoring with us. So they might call crazy plays or try to get big lump sum plays, and our defense can capitalize on mistakes because our offense is going to be so high-powered, quick to score probably. I think Florida State can have a special season, but I am with y'all. Our safety position is thin, and hopefully something works out.
Before we go big picture on the ACC and what's going on there that will have ramifications possibly for years to come and decades to come, we certainly want to stay with Florida State. Chris, is there anything on the recruiting front you wanted to get after?
Well, I do think with Coleman's commitment, it really helped wide receivers as far as recruiting goes. But June 23rd is going to be huge for Florida State. There is so many recruits that are going to be there. But it really starts with, I think it's June 16th. Let me make sure before I say that, but I'm pretty sure it's June 16th. Charles Lester III comes back from the 16th to the 18th on his official visit. We've been, really wanting this young man, and I think that with this official visit, it'll be really big for Florida State. I think that Florida State's doing a really good job, as no matter how many people are predicting JoJo Trader to go to Miami, there's a reason why Florida State's leaving that fifth wide receiver position open. I think that's for JoJo Trader. I think that with Coleman's commitment to Florida State today, then also the things that we've been hearing from coaches and also high school coaches and people that are close to the situation, we're hearing that JoJo's really paying attention to what Florida State's doing in the wide receiver room. But we've got a lot of recruits that are speaking very highly of Florida State right now. There's just a lot of momentum behind what Florida State's doing for the 2024 class. And I anticipate the end of June, the beginning of July being really huge for Florida State as far as getting verbal commits.
Anything on that front, Logan?
No, nothing more than what Chris was saying. Florida State's got a ton of momentum, as you just said, with having a good offseason, having a good season last year. And I think that's all it really took was Florida State showing that they can win games that they should be winning and beating out your rivals. Beating out your in-state rivals was huge for Florida State, and no longer having to really worry too much of some guys going down south. A lot of teams with Gainesville and Miami, those two teams in those spots have a lot of answers to show this upcoming season, whereas Florida State showed they're about it, and they know how to climb out of a major hole that they had themselves in a couple of years ago. So the momentum should be there for Florida State, and we're keeping a close eye on Charles Lester, as he just announced some schools that he's going to be going to visit, including Alabama, Florida State, Georgia. He said he's down to 3 schools, which are Alabama, FSU, Georgia, but then also threw in there that he's going to be visiting Colorado and Deion Sanders on June 9th. Through the 11th. I think he's just kind of going there. I think a lot of recruits, why not go visit there, get spoiled, also be around Deion, and you can spend your time. Definitely if you're a DB or corner, why not go spend time with one of the best to ever do it on a football field at the cornerback position. So that one's one to keep a very close eye on. And, that June 16th to the 18th will be huge, along with keeping an eye on that visit if it actually happens with Georgia on June 23rd to the 25th. If that visit does it, things sealed and dealed, I think Florida State's definitely in a great position anyways right now as being a leader for Lester. But if things go well June 16th to the 18th and he's seen enough, then that wouldn't be shocking if he wants to pop then. But Georgia's Georgia, and they're a powerhouse in college football, so we'll see.
William, thank you so much for the contribution, man. Go Noles, beat Miami. Thank you, William. And since Logan is got to leave us a little bit early, I'll serve this up for you first and foremost, Logan. The ACC 7 schools got together. They're going the legal route, probably save some costs that way if they all go together and say, hey, look over this contract. What can you do for us, guys? and trying to get out of this ACC deal, grant of rights through 2036, that some will say on one hand, this thing is airtight, can't be broken. On the other hand, it's like, hey, you can always find a loophole. You can always find something. We had a big live stream last night, folks. Check it out. We went 3 hours on this. Major rumblings in college football on the ACC front, trying to break free. So your thoughts about what could happen?
One thing that I think Florida State has done a very good job at, and the administration, is getting Alford on board and then allowing him to spread a little team around him to do some investigating on how Florida State can get out of this grant of rights. It's all about money, revenue, media rights, and everything. And, Florida State signed up for something that should have never been signed. I mean, it was unbelievable how awful and how long this contract is with the ACC and media rights and how that goes on with the GOR. But just going off of some comments from Alford, that's just kind of like coaches speak. We're just going to say like AD speak right there. He's one of the biggest enforcers, hearing some things the last couple of days too. He's in line with Clemson and some other schools, top schools in the ACC, pushing to figure out a way to get out of this, or there's got to be some kind of change inside the ACC. But I don't think that Alford is going to wait and sit around for that. He hasn't been. He's been pushing quite a bit, and it's gone to now where he's teaming up with some other universities and their administration. Because if you look at the numbers, we've done this a whole ton of times, how low it is compared to the bigger two conferences and the Power Five. They can even rank them top, like bottom four. It's atrocious. So Florida State and what Alford's trying to do, and then push some things ahead has been nice. That's how it should be. Definitely with Florida State leading the ACC, which is how many millions of people watch this brand, and how many primetime games that Florida State gets, and the amount of money they're getting compared to all the other big dogs and other conferences is just, it's simply not fair. And I'm glad that you're seeing an AD step up for something that should be changed, and it should have been changed years and years and years ago. But now that Florida State is where Florida State is at a tier, it's not at the top tier yet. Still got a lot of things to do and moving parts and stuff, but to now have the last season, and then that there's improvement going on inside this program. They're at a point now where they can step their foot down and say, hey, we're back. It's nice to have Clemson, cool. Miami, you can join in on this if you want to, but we're back now, and we're ready to fix some things that have needed to be fixed for a very long time. And that hurts a lot of these universities that, Florida State could use. Imagine Florida State being able to add to that budget like we were talking about earlier last week, Mark, on that recruiting side. Imagine having a little bit of extra cash to do something that, they can build some recruiting efforts for, and a whole lot of a variety of different things with their football only facility, where they're really relying on donors to bring in money for that. And that's not the easiest way whatsoever. Definitely at Florida State University, it's kind of select and few on what donors want to do. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Just listening to Phillips, the commissioner for the ACC, I just never feel confident out of any statement that comes out of these guys' mouth. I'm sorry, but it's just how it is. So, Alfred said what he needed to say, but we all know what he's up to, and FSU fans should be all about it. I mean, I know they are, but Florida State's now at the point where you're there now. Let's talk, or let's get out, and we're gonna see. But yeah, Michael Alford has had a staff around him, a team to figure out ways. He's literally got people investigating around him how to get out of this GOR that somehow was agreed to egregiously. It's fathoming how idiotic that was.
It seems like with this pushback that we saw later yesterday, just not hours after we all understood what was going on with the 7 of the ACC getting together with lawyers and pushing ahead to try to figure out how to break this GOR, that they got together and made this statement about we're all together. We believe in the ACC. We want to continue to work together. Okay. The way I read that is we all know that Mike Alford, when he went to the board of trustees, basically, if you could kind of read between the lines, it was, this isn't going to get fixed. There's just too much of a gap here. There's no way that the ACC's got enough brand power across the board and so forth and so on. There's a number of reasons they're not going to catch up with the Big Ten and the SEC. Therefore, that's the ultimate goal. But in the meantime, we might as well get paid a little bit more and try to stop some of the bleeding in the meantime. So give us our revenue share, up it for the schools, including us, of course, that make this thing go more than anybody else. So why don't we kind of fix what we've got going on, even though it's not going to make up for the disparity, but we can at least do a little bit better in the interim while we're still working on the big picture over here.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you said it right. That's what, they need to do. If nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to snap out, and nothing's going to happen anytime soon. Got to make some money now. Get it now while you can. Definitely. Where, like I was just saying, where Florida State's at as a program right now. Hell yeah, this Florida State versus LSU game is going to do stupid numbers. And no matter what, Florida State versus Clemson will do stupid numbers. No matter what, Florida State versus Miami being at Doak Campbell this year, that's going to do stupid numbers. Like, Florida State's brand power is one of the top in college football. And when you add that to a team that's pushing for an ACC championship run, potential playoff berth, it becomes a little unfair. And they're back in the top tier of things. So drop your nuts, Alfred. We're here, baby. We're here to talk. Let's do it.
And obviously that exists in every conference. Ohio State and Michigan go down the line. They carry the Big Ten. Alabama, Georgia, they carry the SEC. So that happens in every conference. But when you're making more than everybody else, I'm guessing you can put up with that. If you're Ohio State or Alabama and you're largely carrying that conference, but you are making more money than anybody else, then you're okay with Vandy getting their cut and Rutgers getting their cut. Because they could make the same claim, but they're also making more money than anyone. So they're okay with sharing, because you got to have somebody to play. So you got to have somebody in the conference to play. If you guys follow me on that point, it becomes too much when you're making the least money of any conference in the country. It's kind of where it hits home.
I agree.
Well, my favorite part, I knew Logan said he had to leave at 6:30, so that's what I was waiting on, for him to speak his final piece. Yeah. So Logan, if you're going, y'all plug that in, and then I'll talk about this.
I'll bounce out of here, but appreciate you, Mark. Chris, y'all have a great rest of the show and everything, and we'll have our show at 7 and 20 minutes or so. So if you want to continue talking some Florida State football, feel free to hang out with us. But if not, I'll see y'all next week on Wednesday.
Noel Game Day, everybody. 7 o'clock right here on YouTube, 7 Eastern. Join Logan as soon as we're done. Thanks, man.
Appreciate you guys. Have a good week. See ya.
You too.
You too. Well, I mean, to me, the whole thing with Alford, him coming out and saying, or everybody coming out and saying, we want this all to work out. We want there to be solutions. And the ACC supposedly came to Florida State and these other 6 schools saying that they had some different formats that they could set out for them to make more money, which this year that's needed. Like, close the gap as much as possible, because it's nowhere near being closed. And here's the thing, the gap hasn't started in a hole yet. Next season is when the SEC is going to start making $30 million more than the ACC. Next year is when the Big Ten starts making $35 or $40 million more than the ACC is. So you're not trying to catch that gap right this second, which therefore whatever you can get this year, which is extra, which whether that be you get more money because of playoffs, you get more money because of bowl contingencies, you get more money as far as concessions. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe it equals up to $1 million or $2 million. Best case scenario is you get 10 more million out of it than what you projected to get because of unequal revenue sharing. And that's fine for this year. And that's what you're going to hear them say, that we love being part of the ACC. And right now it's time to show that you're a company man and make as much as you possibly can, because next year, I mean, you really don't give your conference a 2-week notice for your 2-week notice. So you're not going to sit there and play hardball on national television with being in the ACC meetings right now. So you're going to agree that, look, they're working their tails off. They're trying to bring us solutions. We're trying to work the solutions out. But we can't say that there's a problem until there's a problem. And officially, the problem doesn't start until next year in the 2024 season, which is then where Florida State and the other schools are going to go, hey, in this contract, it says that we're going to be competitive with our peers. There's a $30 million gap with this group. There's a $35 million group or gap with this group. We're no longer competitive. So it's either dissolve the ACC or let us out of our contract, because this is no longer competitive. And I think there would be lawyers across this planet that would argue that. They would argue that, yes, this is no longer competitive. Their peers are making a substantial amount more than them. And they're, one of the schools, or these are 7 schools that bring just as many views, just as much money to the table as the top 5 or 6 in the SEC and the top 5 or 6 in the Big Ten. And then you look at like the Big 12 or whichever one is over there that's actually going to make more money than Florida State, if not both. And it's just ridiculous to see that Purdue is going to make more money than Clemson, or that UCF is going to make more money than Florida State potentially. Like that's an absolute joke. So no, they're not going to stand for it. Now this year they're going to get as much money as they can out of the situation, because we're not jumping out of the conference this year. Like, there's so many things that go along with getting out of a conference and going to a new one. It don't happen overnight. It's a process. But what in the big picture to look at is you get all the money you possibly can right now. And then therefore, when we go to court to have these conversations about us not being equal to our peers, we're not being compensated as much as everyone else is, and how unfair it is, and that they're breaking the contract. It's a breach of contract because they're not holding up to their end of the deal, stating that we're going to be competitive with all peers around the country. That's now no longer true. And a lot of people are asking, why doesn't ESPN jump in and say, look, we can give more money for the contract? And I was like, there's no reason for ESPN to do that. And the only one possible reason that there could be is that, yes, if Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and some of these other schools, maybe not all of them, but some of these schools do end up in the Big Ten, then ESPN does lose all revenue on Florida State, all revenue on Clemson. Because if I'm not mistaken, the Big Ten's CBS, NBC, and Fox, so they don't really play on ESPN. So the only argument that I think ESPN, that people would have that ESPN steps up and gives more money, is that you're going to lose all that revenue from a Clemson, or all that revenue from a Florida State, or they're that confident that they can get them landed in the SEC. And if you get them landed in the SEC, then you get the best of both worlds again. But I don't think that every school that makes the ACC money right now, as in the Miami, the Clemson, the Florida State, and maybe North Carolina or NC State, I don't think that all of them land in the SEC, but I think that the Big Ten and the SEC comes out firing on who outbids who for those top programs. Right now, I would say that the Big Ten's got the most, or the majority of the amount of money, and it makes most sense for these schools to go there first. But a lot of people are infatuated with the SEC when it comes to football. And that's the other problem that we have as fans. Only focus on a sport, one particular sport, or we only focus on what revenue football brings or what revenue basketball brings. And then you don't look at the full picture, as in how much money you get if you do go to the Big Ten. The research money that you get from the AAU, all the money that they share, you're talking about a crazy amount of money that completely flips the university as a whole, not just the football program, not just the TV revenue. We're talking about just a stupid amount of money that goes all the way across, including
Billions.
Yeah. What I've been explaining to people is I don't care if we end up in the SEC or if we end up in the Big Ten. But if I had a choice, I want to end up in the Big Ten because of what Florida State's trying to do with research, what they are doing with research currently. And there's about 15 more million a year with what the Big Ten's doing versus the SEC. I think schools in the Big Ten will eventually make like 102, 103 million a year, and I think the SEC is geared to make like 80 something million a year. Now, will that all change? The craziest part of this is that the SEC, the Big Ten, I think the Big 12 or whatever it is, they all go back to the negotiating table again before the ACC goes back. And it's crazy to sit there and think that the ACC thinks or that anyone thinks that these schools aren't going to do everything in their possible power to get out of a situation that's going to hold them till 2036. Because if you were to sit in this conference until 2036, you're going to be so far behind, it's arguably you'll never catch up. It's not a possibility. So to sit here and think that 7 schools came together, potentially a number 8 has came to the table, to sit here and think that by next year you're not going to get some type of answer on what these schools are going to do, then you're wanting to put blinders on and you're wanting to think that some hero is going to jump in here and throw hundreds of millions of dollars around, and it's just not going to happen. The ESPN doesn't have to negotiate this. There's no reason for them to. If they get half of the teams from the ACC that are money makers into the SEC, then it's a win-win for them. It's potential that the ACC is losing money. I mean, ESPN is losing money on having a damn ACC network. It's potential that they're not doing anything besides blowing money in it because it's so terrible. I mean, for Bally Sports to be head and heels over what the ACC network is, that's already ridiculous within itself. Sunshine Sports is better than the ACC network. I mean, the best commercials they can get is the My Pillow commercial. So, I mean, we're not talking about if the ACC goes away, that ESPN is losing some high dollar revenue source, because they're not. They're probably blowing money in it. It's probably a tax write off for all I know. So to sit here and to think that ESPN is going to invest more money into the ACC network or invest more money into it might be maybe Florida State, Clemson, and Miami bring so much money to the table that it breaks it even. But the problem is the below average teams that aren't getting the viewership, that aren't bringing in any type of money, it's not worth them to throw that kind of money in it for 3 teams when those 3 teams could go elsewhere. And maybe you land 2 of the 3 in the SEC, and now you're getting all the riches from it. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I don't think that Florida State, I don't think that Clemson or Miami, or I don't even think there's an ACC regardless, unless there's some crazy thing happen and they get some teams out of the lower tier conferences to come up in the ACC, and it happens. But if these 8 teams, from what we've all heard, if 8 teams come forth and say that they want out, then it dissolves the ACC. I don't know how else that's supposed to work, but if you've got 8 universities telling you this is not working for us, this marriage is over, it's time to divorce, I mean, usually the people that want a divorce get it.
Well, Chris, you went in a number of great directions right there. So I'll try to weed through what sticks out to me. So you brought up both the SEC and the Big Ten going to the negotiate, and the Big 12 going to back to the negotiating table before the ACC gets a chance in 2036, if there is an ACC at that point. Everybody should realize that these contracts have never gone down. There have never been a conference has never gone from contract to contract and had the money go down. They are doing nothing but going up, and they're going to go up even exponentially for the SEC and the Big Ten, because they're doing nothing but getting more powerful and more valuable as we go. And the contract that the Big Ten just signed was $7 billion and only a 7-year contract. So that's one thing. The other thing is I'm guessing that a lot of Florida State fans would like to play in the SEC for obvious reasons. From a location standpoint, they're schools and teams that they're used to seeing, used to being close to. You can make easy road trips to Auburn and other places. I get that. Florida, of course, but already play the Gators on a regular basis. they're two great football conferences. The SEC is better on the field right now. The Big Ten is the second best conference. I don't think either one is debatable. The SEC is the best, and the Big Ten is the second best. And from a financial and every other standpoint, they're the two best by far. So Florida State could not go wrong there. When it comes to the ACC network, I know that when the ACC network rolled out of the gate, and I did have some involvement in this at the time, not heavy involvement, but that was, I believe, 2019 at ESPN. For whatever reason, and I read a few articles at the time and also talked to a lot of people in-house at ESPN as to why the rollout for the ACC network didn't come anywhere close to the SEC. The SEC network basically hit the ground running, and it had the same distribution as ESPN2 did, like that. Like 95 million homes right out of the gate. And the ACC network was 15, 18 million homes, and never, I don't know where the numbers stand now. I can just about guarantee it never caught up. If you watch the productions, not just on the games themselves, but on the documentaries, studio shows, if you're watching the SEC network, you might as well be watching ESPN. If you're watching the ACC network, it's fine. It's okay. You might as well be watching the Big Ten network. Like, it's not in the same ballpark. Why? I don't know. And I would think, to your point, that could be just a huge write-off for Disney. And they already do a zillion other productions and broadcasts. They already owned those facilities. They were already in Charlotte. They already used those facilities for ESPNU. They just turn them into the next production, the next network, the next whatever. I don't think that's a big factor in this.
Well, the best part of it is that not only just Florida State and Clemson realize it, that you've got a multitude of the teams in the conference that realize that, hey, if we go through this until 2036, and this is coming from Miami's always going to be a brand, regardless of how bad they've done over the past 20 years. They're still a huge brand. They're potentially getting back to where they belong. And then you look at Clemson, who has basically carried the ACC for the past 5 or 6 years with Florida State being down so bad. When those schools are worried about the gap that there's going to be, what makes you think that the guys below them aren't double worried? Because if we're going to get left behind, then they're surely getting left behind, because we're already outperforming what we're getting money-wise. We're already, nationally competing in facilities with what we're bringing to the table. We're already nationally competing with the recruiting, and those teams already aren't, and they're getting the same amount of money as we are. So what makes anyone think that if there's a $30 to $35 million gap, that these schools, don't diminish just, hey, we can't have a football program no more? Like, people don't realize that you're only a couple of years away from some really bad things happening like this, that a university, to keep, says, hey, we can't afford the football program no more because we can't win on the field. We can't get recruits in. We're not getting televised the way that everyone else does. It's time to close shop. So maybe all the other sports survive, maybe not. But Florida State, Miami, Clemson, probably North Carolina and NC State, Virginia Tech, they are not willing to risk that. There's no way that they're going to risk the potential of it even getting to a point to where they don't want there to be a program. So I just think that Florida State gets to announce in 2024 that they'll be leaving the conference by 2025, 2026, and that you only have to deal with 2 years of revenue gap, and you can come back from that. You can't come back from 13, 14 years of it. It's not possible. So I'm ready for whatever it is to happen. I know everyone is in this day and time, we can just turn on a screen, whether it be YouTube or a television screen, or hell, now you can get food out of a microwave in 30 seconds. I know we're all ready for it to happen right now, but when you're talking about this many moving parts, this amount of money that we're speaking of, it doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take some time, but I don't think that Alford and these other athletic directors across the ACC wasted any time with it, because time is of the essence. We can't buy time. We can't get it back. So it's time to say something now and not wait till next year. Let's let them know this year we're unhappy. That way it's not a I guess a roadblock in the middle of the ACC. Like, hey, we're leaving, by the way. I mean, you don't want to come in and just say that. So you got to let them know we're going to give you every opportunity to fix this, but being honest, there is no fixing this. There's nowhere the ACC can snatch this kind of money and make this work. It's not there. It's visibly not possible. So we'll do the best that we can while we're still here, but I'm looking forward to a different logo on the left chest of our uniforms, and I know that other people are as well.
And it's a lot more complicated than this, but I can come up with two basic reasons why it's not going to happen. One is that the ACC simply is not worth as much as the SEC and the Big Ten. So no network's going to give them as much money as the SEC and the Big Ten. We just did a huge series on TV ratings for 2022. And sure, Florida State holds its own. Clemson holds its own. That's pretty much it. There's a pretty good drop off after that. Miami, Louisville do okay in TV ratings. But in regards to, just to give you a comparison that's not going to poke any fun at the ACC, I'll take it outside the conference. Ohio State Northwestern doesn't sound like a very good football game, does it? That game outrated every game in the Pac-12 last year. Every game, even USC and UCLA, their top-rated game. Just more people watch the SEC and the Big Ten. That's all there is to it. Now, obviously, Florida State is a huge brand, a huge draw that would only add to that. And certainly both of those conferences would love to have Florida State on board. So that's one reason why it just simply is not valuable enough. And to our second point, it's not going to happen because there's just no reason for ESPN to do that. They're not going to suddenly say, oh, yeah, we made a mistake. You're really worth each 72 million a year, not 36 million a year. So we're going to hand the money over. We made a mistake. Sorry. We undervalued you. You made a stupid deal and we're going to be kind and make that up for you. No.
It's like, that episode that you did quite some time ago. I don't remember if I was on that one or not, but where you explained the type of channel, what, like ABC is always going to have crazy viewership because one has it. Two, ABC's like, it's the channel. But then you look at the networks that have the Big Ten, and when you're talking about Fox, you're talking about CBS. Like those are those premier channels. There were some fans that were in a Twitter space. They were like, TV's TV. They're going to get viewership regardless of what channel it's on. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's not true. And that was based off of the episode that I was either a part of or watched because there were so many. But I'm like, no, that's not true. Florida State and Clemson do a good job of getting on the premier channel that the ACC gets to watch. But I would love to know what Florida State does on a Fox or a CBS. I know what they do on ABC, which is great. But when I look at Fox, Fox doesn't resonate with me other than football or maybe potentially baseball at times. When I look at CBS Sports, nothing resonates other than football, especially college football. So it's like, it does matter what network you're on because here's all the proof to it. And y'all threw it out there perfectly. And I was absolutely just astonished by the numbers that these channels do versus like whatever this deal was they were trying to get done with CW that has just reruns of other shows. I'm just like, I can't believe people are potentially going to this.
Yeah, you have to make it easy for people to run into the games. You don't make it hard. You don't make it difficult for them to have to find it. And just one other note about the Big Ten deal, and then we'll wrap it up. For me, what I thought was brilliant in this deal is they basically went to an NFL model. The NFL's on every network. They do CBS, they do Fox, they do NBC on Sunday night, they do ESPN on Monday night. And they obligate those networks to promote their games on the other networks. Otherwise, you wouldn't hear CBS talking about and giving you a lineup that says, oh, the NFL games are going to be on NBC and Fox and da-da-da. But they have to because it's in the contract. The NFL says you got to promote our games wherever they are. Well, the SEC is going to be relegated to all ESPN networks. But for the Big Ten, when they're on NBC, you're going to see, well, you got to flip over later tonight. The other Big Ten games going to be on CBS. Then the other Big Ten games next week are going to be on Fox, and they're going to be on all three major networks every Saturday at different times. And before and after all those games, they're going to be promoting their other games on all the other networks. I think it's I think it was a good move to make. All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here at Florida State Seminoles Live. It's every Wednesday at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Chris, we definitely want to give you some time to let everyone know what you've got working.
Yeah, we should have a couple of recruits coming up real soon that we're going to bring onto the show tomorrow night. We're going to have a special episode based off of what's happening with Coleman, also based off of the recruiting news that we're hearing back in the channel of things. So make sure that you come over and check that out on the YouTube channels at Sporadics at 7:30 Eastern on Mondays and Thursdays. We always got a show going. Co-host James Coleman, former fullback at Florida State. We also got Chip Wesley that comes on, the lead guy for Unconquered 850. So y'all come over and check it out. We usually have multitude of guys come on from other channels or other media outlets. So come over and check us out and see what you think.
Thanks, everyone. See you back here next Wednesday at 6. Bring a friend with you, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday.